You walk into the electronics store telling yourself you're just going to browse, just going to look around for 5 minutes, just killing time before heading home. But then you notice the newest flagship phone glowing under the lights like it was designed specifically to call your name. And even though the phone in your pocket still works perfectly fine except for a slightly weaker battery and a small scratch on the corner of the screen, you start building a story in your head that an upgrade would make your life smoother, faster, more professional, more productive. So you convince yourself this isn't a luxury purchase but a smart investment in your future. And within 20 minutes your card is swiped for $1,200 and you walk out holding a pristine box like you just bought a piece of the future. At first you feel amazing, successful, ahead of everyone else, like you've stepped into a higher version of your life. But the moment you sit in your car and peel off the plastic and hold that flawless device in your hand, something strange happens. Because suddenly everything else you own looks outdated and embarrassing next to it, and that old cracked charging cable you've used for years now looks like trash that doesn't deserve to touch this masterpiece of technology. So you stop by the counter and grab the premium wireless charger for another $40 without even thinking twice. Then you get home, set the phone on your nightstand, and notice that your cheap plastic case makes the device look ridiculous, like dressing a sports car with dollar store accessories. So you order the leather case because it matches the quality. And that's another $60, and while setting it up you realize your wired headphones don't even connect anymore, which makes you feel like you're missing the full experience. So naturally you click buy on the wireless earbuds for $250, and before 2 days have passed, that original $1,200 decision has quietly turned into $1,600, and you barely remember making half those purchases. And here's the scary part. This isn't just poor discipline or bad budgeting. This is a psychological domino effect that has emptied more bank accounts than recessions ever did. And it's the same invisible force that explains why people who win the lottery often end up broke and why buying a dream house somehow leads to constant financial stress instead of peace. This phenomenon has a name, and understanding it might save you thousands of dollars every single year. My name is Bobby, and on this channel we uncover the hidden mental scripts that keep ordinary people trapped in quiet financial chaos. Because most of us don't buy things out of necessity like we think we do. We buy things because our other possessions pressure us into it. And today I'm going to show you exactly how that happens and how to stop it before it drains your future. To really understand this trap, we have to travel back a few centuries to France, to the year 1765, where a brilliant philosopher named Denis Diderot lived a simple, modest life surrounded by old furniture, worn rugs, scratched desks, and practical clothes. And despite having very little money, he felt surprisingly content because everything he owned matched everything else. Nothing felt out of place, nothing demanded an upgrade, and his world was perfectly consistent. Then one day Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia, admired his work so much that she offered to buy his personal library for a fortune while allowing him to keep the books. And overnight the struggling philosopher suddenly became wealthy, which sounds like the beginning of a happy story but actually turned into the start of his downfall. Like anyone who finally has extra money, he decided to treat himself and purchased a beautiful scarlet dressing gown made from luxurious fabric, soft, elegant, refined. The kind of robe that made him feel like royalty the moment he put it on. But when he returned to his study and sat down to write, he noticed something that bothered him deeply because the robe looked magnificent while his old wooden desk looked dirty and broken. And the contrast felt unbearable. So he replaced the desk. But the new desk made the rug look pathetic. So he replaced the rug. Then the curtains looked cheap. So he replaced the curtains. Then the chair, the paintings, the shelves, the decorations, one by one everything in the room had to be upgraded until months later his entire home had transformed into a luxurious space that matched the robe. And by the time he was done, every coin he had gained was gone. He later wrote a confession saying, "I was the master of my old robe, but I became the slave of the new one." And that sentence perfectly describes what we now call the Diderot Effect, which is the tendency for one new purchase to trigger a cascade of additional spending because we crave visual and psychological consistency. We think we control our possessions, but the truth is our possessions start controlling us. And if you think this only happened to some French philosopher centuries ago, you're wrong, because modern marketing has turned this effect into a weapon. Imagine you decide to get healthier and buy an expensive exercise bike, telling yourself it's an investment in fitness, but when it arrives you suddenly feel awkward wearing your old oversized t-shirts, so you buy proper workout clothes, then specialized shoes, then a fitness mat, then dumbbells, then a new TV to stream workouts, and before long you haven't just bought a bike, you've bought an entirely new lifestyle that costs 5 times more than you expected. This happens because humans crave identity consistency, meaning once you upgrade one high-status item, you subconsciously feel pressure to upgrade everything else to match that new identity. So if you buy a luxury car, you no longer feel comfortable parking it outside a rundown apartment or wearing worn-out clothes or eating off cheap plates, and the car silently raises the minimum standard for your entire life. It becomes the anchor that pulls every other expense upward. This is why fake it till you make it is dangerous advice, because pretending to be rich by buying status symbols forces you to spend like someone rich long before your income can support it, and that gap quietly destroys your finances. Most people evaluate purchases in isolation, asking themselves if they can afford the price tag. But that's the wrong question, because you must calculate the chain reaction cost, meaning the total amount of extra spending that item will demand afterward. A $10,000 kitchen renovation often becomes $35,000 because new cabinets make the fridge look old, the fridge makes the floor look outdated, the floor makes the living room look sad, and suddenly the entire house needs remodeling even though you were perfectly happy before you started. The upgrade didn't solve dissatisfaction. The upgrade created dissatisfaction. And here's the cruel twist: expensive possessions often reduce your freedom instead of increasing it, because the nicer something is, the more afraid you are to use it. So the white couch becomes something you protect instead of relax on, the luxury watch becomes something you worry about scratching, and slowly you start serving your stuff instead of your stuff serving you. So how do you break this cycle without giving up nice things entirely? First, predict the chain reaction before buying anything and ask yourself what additional purchases this item will demand. Then calculate the full system price rather than the sticker price, because if the real number scares you, that's your warning sign. Second, adopt a one-in, one-out rule where every new item replaces an old one, which prevents clutter and forces you to stay intentional instead of endlessly accumulating. Third, deliberately keep some parts of your life simple and modest, because when your baseline is humble, you feel zero pressure to constantly upgrade, and that freedom allows you to save and invest while everyone else is stuck maintaining appearances. There's nothing wrong with enjoying quality things, but you must understand the psychological game being played on you, because consumer culture thrives on making you feel incomplete and convincing you that happiness is always one purchase away, when in reality that one purchase usually just resets the race and makes you start spending all over again. Don't become the servant of your possessions. Be the owner of your choices. If this perspective helps you think twice before your next impulse buy, hit the like button, subscribe for more breakdowns on how money and psychology really interact, and I'll see you in the next video. And remember, sometimes the most powerful purchase you can make is the one you decide not to make. And if you think this is just about phones or robes or furniture, you're still underestimating how deep this pattern runs, because the Diderot effect doesn't live in stores or price tags. It lives inside your psychology, quietly whispering that who you are is defined by what you own, and the moment you accept that lie, you begin outsourcing your self-worth to objects that depreciate faster than your confidence can keep up. Because here's what really happens behind the scenes, something most people never notice until it's too late, which is that every purchase isn't just a transaction but a vote for a new version of yourself. And when that new version feels more sophisticated, more successful, more admired, your brain starts rejecting anything that doesn't fit the upgraded identity, almost like your old life has become an ill-fitting costume that you're embarrassed to wear. Think about the last time you bought something expensive, something you normally wouldn't buy, something that felt slightly out of character for you, and remember how for a moment you didn't just feel like someone who owned that item, but you actually felt like a different person entirely, like you had leveled up, like you had stepped into a higher social tier. And that emotional high is exactly what marketers are selling you, because they know if they can change your identity even slightly, the rest of your wallet will follow automatically. This is why luxury brands never talk about features or practicality and instead show you slow-motion shots of yachts, rooftop parties, perfectly dressed people laughing under golden sunlight, because they aren't selling products, they are selling belonging, they are selling status, they are selling the fantasy that if you buy the object you get to become the person in the commercial. And once you buy into that fantasy, the spending never stops, because maintaining an identity is infinitely more expensive than buying a single item. The phone demands accessories. The car demands a lifestyle. The house demands renovations. The clothes demand certain places you're supposed to go. And suddenly your entire life becomes a performance you're financially obligated to keep funding. I once knew a guy who got a big promotion at work and decided to celebrate by leasing a luxury sedan that cost twice as much as his old car. And at first it felt like proof that he had finally made it, like he had crossed some invisible line into success. But within months he stopped eating at his favorite cheap diners because they didn't feel appropriate. He started buying expensive clothes so he wouldn't look out of place stepping out of the car. He moved to a pricier apartment with covered parking to protect it, And by the end of the year, his higher salary had completely disappeared into higher expenses, leaving him more stressed than he had ever been when he was making less money. That's the trap nobody talks about. Lifestyle inflation doesn't feel like inflation. It feels like progress. Feels like growth. Feels deserved. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because when expenses grow silently alongside income, you never actually move forward. You just run faster on the same treadmill while convincing yourself you're climbing a mountain. Meanwhile, the people who quietly build real wealth often look boring from the outside, driving older cars, wearing simple clothes, living in homes that are comfortable but not flashy. And it's easy to underestimate them until you realize they aren't playing the same game at all, because while everyone else is spending to look rich, they're investing to become rich. And here's the irony that almost feels unfair, which is that the less you care about impressing people, the easier it becomes to accumulate money, and the more money you accumulate, the less you need to impress anyone, creating a positive spiral that works exactly opposite to the Diderot effect. Instead of one purchase forcing 10 more, one smart decision creates freedom, and that freedom creates options, and those options create confidence that no object could ever provide. Because true wealth isn't about matching furniture or having the newest device or curating the perfect aesthetic life for strangers on social media. True wealth is about waking up without financial anxiety, about being able to say no to things you don't want to do, about having time, space, and mental clarity, and none of those benefits come from buying more stuff, they come from needing less stuff. So the next time you feel that urge, that subtle voice telling you that upgrading something will finally make everything feel complete, pause for a second and ask yourself a different question. Not can I afford this? But what will this cost me beyond the price tag? What else will it demand from me? And is this object going to serve my life or slowly make me serve it? Because sometimes the most powerful financial move you can make is walking out of the store empty-handed while everyone else is lining up at the register. And in a world addicted to consuming, restraint is a superpower that almost nobody practices. So before you chase the next shiny upgrade, remember Denis Diderot staring at his elegant robe while his simple, peaceful life quietly slipped away. Remember how one beautiful object turned into months of spending and stress. And remember that comfort, freedom, and contentment rarely come from adding more but almost always come from subtracting what you don't truly need. Master your possessions before they master you, protect your identity from being hijacked by marketing, and build a life that feels rich even when nobody is watching, because at the end of the day the goal isn't to look successful, it's to actually be free. And if this video made you rethink even one purchase today, make sure you like and subscribe, because every week we break down the hidden psychological traps that keep people stuck financially so you can design a life that works for you instead of against you, and I'll see you in the next one. But there is an even deeper layer to this that almost nobody talks about, and once you see it you can't unsee it, because the Diderot effect is not really about money at all, it's about emotion. It's about the quiet discomfort you feel when your external world doesn't match the image you carry of yourself inside your head. And human beings will spend absurd amounts of money just to silence that discomfort for a few minutes. Because the truth is most purchases are not logical decisions but emotional negotiations. Little bargains we make with ourselves that sound rational on the surface but are secretly driven by insecurity, comparison, and the fear of not being enough. So we say things like, I deserve this, or it's an investment, or it will save me time, when what we really mean is, I want to feel worthy, or I want to feel respected, or I want my life to look like the lives I see online. And modern life makes this 10 times worse because you are no longer comparing yourself only to your neighbors or coworkers, but to millions of carefully curated highlight reels on social media where everyone seems richer, happier, fitter, more stylish, and more successful than you, which means every scroll quietly creates dissatisfaction with perfectly good things you were satisfied with 5 minutes ago. Your couch was fine until you saw someone's designer living room. Your car was fine until you saw your friend's upgrade post. Your vacation was fine until Instagram showed you beaches in Greece. Nothing changed about your life, but suddenly everything feels inadequate. And that feeling of inadequacy is the fuel that keeps the entire consumer economy running. Because a content person is a terrible customer, but an insecure person is the perfect one. So companies don't just sell products, they manufacture dissatisfaction first. They subtly convince you that your current life is lacking, and then they position their product as the solution, which means you're not buying the item itself, you're buying relief from the anxiety they just created. And relief is addictive. That's why the excitement of buying something new fades so quickly, because what you're really experiencing isn't happiness but temporary anxiety reduction. And once your brain adapts to the new normal, the anxiety returns, just attached to something else, which sends you back to the store or the website or the checkout button again. chasing the same short-lived hit. It's the same loop as junk food or gambling or social media likes, just dressed up as shopping. Buy, feel good, adapt, feel lacking again, repeat. And if you zoom out far enough, you realize you're not actually building a better life. You're just renting moments of excitement while your bank account quietly bleeds in the background. This is why so many people making six figures still feel broke. Because income alone doesn't solve psychological spending, and without awareness, every raise simply becomes permission to upgrade your problems to a more expensive version. Bigger house, bigger bills. Nicer car, higher insurance. Luxury gadgets, constant replacements. More money, same stress. It's like pouring water into a bucket full of holes. Meanwhile, the people who escape this cycle do something radically different that almost looks boring from the outside. Because instead of constantly upgrading their lifestyle, they upgrade their mindset. They learn to detach their identity from what they own. They stop seeing possessions as proof of success, and they start seeing them as tools that either serve a purpose or don't. And tools don't need to be impressive. A hammer doesn't need to be stylish. A chair doesn't need to signal status. Car doesn't need to impress strangers. If it works, it works. That simple philosophy sounds almost too basic, but it's incredibly powerful, because the moment you stop trying to extract self-worth from objects, you remove the emotional trigger that causes the spending spiral in the first place. When your identity is internal instead of external, nothing outside of you can pressure you into upgrading. You can walk past the newest phone and genuinely not care. You can drive an older car and feel zero embarrassment. You can wear the same jacket for years and still feel confident. And that emotional independence is worth more than any luxury brand could ever sell you. Because here's something nobody in advertising will ever tell you, which is that the highest form of wealth is not having the most, it's needing the least. When you need very little to feel satisfied, the world loses its power to manipulate you. Prices stop controlling you. Trends stop controlling you. Other people's opinions stop controlling you. And suddenly you realize freedom was never about upgrading your life, it was about lowering your requirements. So next time you feel that familiar itch to buy something new, something shiny, something that promises to finally complete the picture, take a breath and ask yourself whether you actually want the object or whether you just want the feeling you think it will give you. Because if it's the feeling you're chasing, there are cheaper and healthier ways to get it, like improving your skills, strengthening your relationships, building your health, or investing your money so your future self has options. Because unlike stuff, those things don't depreciate. They compound. And compounding quietly is how real wealth is built. Not with dramatic purchases, not with flashy upgrades, but with small, boring decisions repeated consistently while everyone else is distracted by the next scarlet robe. So protect your peace, guard your wallet, and remember that every time you resist an unnecessary upgrade, you're not missing out. You're buying back a piece of your freedom, and that might be the most valuable thing you ever own.